Sure, they talked about prioritizing, and I know that Tony did, I heard Mary say that too, so.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I would ask Bruce, I mean, that should be something we should send to him.
Well, once we get the full budget, and Mary presents her budget, that's what we would ask her, she should be able to tell us.
Yeah,
Well, that's what I mean.
well, I think we'll have Bruce present that, right?
Someone should be here to answer those questions, I mean, you know,
Yeah,
help
they
us
sure
before the
should.
public session.
What I wind up
wondered
doing is
same
the
thing.
day after our meeting, I wind up calling Mary and we go over it.
Yeah,
You know, where's the other $118,000 coming from? Yeah, and this is the budget that doesn't end till July, right? It's the current budget. So this is the current budget year.
I'm assuming this is a request for how much money you're gonna have to give back. So,
Well, now, okay, read the minutes, and if they're correct, we're going to approve them, then we'll go on to the budget discussion.
I can't see, I don't see.
Has everybody read the minutes?
I read it, but I wasn't here, so I have to.
Well, yeah,
So I make a
you can't do
motion-
anything anyway.
I make a motion to accept the minutes as read.
I'll second.
Okay, motion's been made and seconded to accept the minutes as stated. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Well, I have to abstain, just because,
And one abstention, correct?
yes. Can I ask a question before we move on? I mean, number 4 here, I don't know, I mean, it's my understanding, the way that we've always done it in the town is all of the town departments and everything else present their budget to the selectmen, and the selectmen decide what goes on, and then it's presented to us,
Correct.
and then they would bring in
Correct.
individuals, say, okay, we
It had
have
been
questions,
gone
and
over.
can we, yeah. I mean, and I'm seeing that on 4, someone came in, you know, our registrar, Sue Armstrong, came in and was, for lack of any way, I mean, the way I'm reading it, bashing because her budget was cut. And I'm saying, isn't that the democratic process? Shouldn't
Number
she be
one,
taking
we've
that up
already,
with?
okay, Brian, let me explain to you what happened. All right, she did go over her budget with Mary Miller. She explained to Mary everything that had to be done,
Mhm.
and then when the budget was presented to us, everything that was mandated, state mandated, had been cut. So consequently, what's gonna happen, if it continues to be cut, is next year, we're gonna get all those transfers because it's gotta come back out of the general fund and go back into her budget anyway.
Right, but that's something she should be
So
talking to Mary
my
about,
point
not
is
us.
when, well,
That's what we
again, as I said, I have
Yeah, okay, all right.
information.
That's what we said.
I have information and we'll go over that.
Your confusion
But right
was
now,
well
the
spread last week,
transfers
too.
are in front of us.
Okay,
You were
no,
here.
Right now, the transfers are in front of you, so we will discuss the transfers. By the way, Aaron, thank you for sending them online because it really makes it easier. The selectmen get them to you right after their meeting.
Yeah, she emailed them to me.
Excellent. It's all pretty much cut and dry.
Yeah, I see what it is, yeah, it's just.
I like the explanations in there.
I'm sorry?
I like the written explanations in there, it makes it easy.
Mm-hmm, I do too. Has everybody had a chance to look at them? Is there any questions about them?
No, when I look at them, I'll tell you.
You have a copy of them, Brian? Here.
I'm sorry,
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Brian, I thought you had a copy.
No, sure.
It's pretty cut and dry. I mean, they came in under certain things, they went into the general fund, now they gotta be put into their regular account.
Yep,
Pretty cut and dry.
I don't see anything wrong with it, I just make a motion that we.
Well, hang on, let Brian,
No, I see it. I mean, this I don't know, I'd have to take a look at the past one. State grants, that's a catch-all for the police department to just
Well-
take money out of for a different fund, or?
They wrote in for a cash grant, for a state grant, and the grant came through. When it came through, it got put into the general fund. Now that it's gonna go back into the police department, we wrote the grant for that.
It's coming into state grants. Is state grants a police department fund?
No, it is not a police department fund.
So we're taking it from the general fund, putting it into state grants, which then we're gonna turn around and put it into a different fund in the police department.
No, the check was deposited into the general fund. The question fund to be put back into state grants so that the police, oh, I see what you're saying.
Brian's
Okay.
correct. Maybe they put down the wrong fund, maybe that's the correct.
I'm afraid they might have. And you know, thank you,
2241,
Brian, I didn't
No,
notice that.
No problem, I'm just scratching my head going, we're gonna do another transfer.
No, I didn't notice that. This is the time that I wish Lisa was here, but anyway, I'm gonna have to call her and ask her about that.
I mean, we can,
2241,
I suppose we can approve the motion to put it in the appropriate fund.
Correct, correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
for the police department to utilize for, you know, the
That way
fighting
they
the
can just
war.
amend it on Tuesday.
Correct, that way they've
Brian,
got
what
carte
is-
blanche. They've got
41,
the ability to do it.
Well, it's the second one here, moving to $5,000. It just says to state
Hold on a second,
grants.
Brian. What account is it?
They want the funds to be put into the 7100, oh, wait a minute, wait a minute.
That is the police department's.
They
Yeah,
call it
state-
state
So it's
grants.
just labeled, it's just labeled
State
incorrectly.
grants.
Right,
Okay, so, all right.
Should say twice.
So what should it say,
Police
Rick?
department,
Well,
state
it's
grant.
in the, it's in
State
the
grant
police,
fund.
it's in the police department subsection, so it just says state grants.
Okay.
yes, it's in the
Yeah.
police department, some section, in the 2241 7100,
Okay, so that clarifies it then, thank you.
which is state grants under the police department. So in other words, if they get any in,
Got it?
okay,
Yep,
so we're good.
okay.
Okay, so do I have a motion?
I make a motion that we approve the transfers from the general fund to the appropriate funds identified.
Is there a second? There's a motion made and seconded that we approve the transfers as stated. Is there any discussion? Any other discussion? Okay. All those in favor?
Uh,
Opposed? So ordered. Okay, now we're down to the budget. My discussion with Mrs. Mitta after the last meeting was that these registrar's funds were mandated, and she did agree to it. Whether she's actually put the funds back in or not, I don't know, because I don't have a revised copy of it as we speak. I thought she might have it here tonight. But I'm almost sure, when we finished our conversation, that's what she was going to do. If not, well, as I just stated, we'll be having a whole year's full of transfers to pay for anything that comes through that is mandated.
I don't understand how the salaries are not.
Salaries are.
No, and that was already discussed, and that was approved, that because she was not on contract and her deputies are not on contract, they are not going to be getting
Yeah,
raised.
there's no rate.
They are well aware of that.
John made that very clear, John
Right,
liked
he
it.
made it very clear, and they are well aware of
Part
that.
of the other confusion, when I.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Part of the other confusion, when I questioned why there was line items that were zeroed out, was when the registrar submitted her budget, she lumped a lot of items together. And I had told them that they really should, as long as the bottom line
She
isn't
was doing that in
changes.
an effort to make it a smaller budget, maybe an easier budget to put together, but, you know, she's gone over that with Mary
You
again.
can't track the, phone bills and that.
And
type
she's
of stuff.
decided that from here on out, she will break that all apart, so everybody will know exactly what it is, which is what I've always been an advocate of as well, as you well know, Rick.
Right.
So I've been an advocate of breaking it out, so we know exactly where we're going. So, that's the one budget. Most of the other ones look very good. That was the one budget that, really didn't equate. Now, does anybody have any questions on any other budgets?
But on the voter registrars, were there reconciliation?
You'll have to
between-
speak up, Conrado.
But on the voter registrars budget and, confusion that was there, were there a reconciliation between Mrs. Mira and Mrs. Armstrong regarding all the differences that were discussed over here that we were not supposed to have heard it? that day.
Well,
What is the final, what is the final?
the final one was, I think I'm understanding your question.
Yep.
The final consensus was that because they are state mandated and she has to pay these things,
Oh, okay.
because it's a state audited election and when the referendum, that those funds will be put back in. It isn't something that she's coming up with, it's mandated. It's like the school with the teacher's salary, it's mandated. Not much we can do about it.
Is that these areas that are zeros, like the $3,000 for the budget referendums and audits?
Those are the money questions.
Yeah, that's, I mean, that's only if we have that many. I mean, it could come in at $1,000.
And that's the one line item
Yeah.
that she's very familiar with, and if it happens, it's there, and she generally every year gives back.
Understand,
From that
no,
line
I
item.
get it, I'm just, you know, all right.
We went over that, yeah, that was one of the big things.
Yep.
Now, Mary is also saying that she can give back 200 and some odd $1,000. Well, if she does that, which would be wonderful, but if she does that, that's $180,000 that's gonna come out of the roads and the buildings, more or less the buildings. Okay, and that's a lot of money that Bruce could use to get the buildings at least shored up and some of the maintenance that needs to be done. Because we're gonna start losing these old buildings. But I don't know what to tell her. I mean, she wants the 180 to be able to work on the town, but yet if we insist that she has to give it back or that we're gonna cut, then she'll give it back.
Well, I think the discussion, I can't remember if it was last meeting or the previous one, and it might have even been after the meeting that all the selectmen were here. Jen came up, Jen Davis, the first wife, and she was even mentioning, these are things that he just can't do. He doesn't have.
Correct.
You know, so it's not like he could spend the money doing it anyway, they just don't have the manpower to do it.
Correct, but according to what she said, now, and again, you're absolutely right, because I did bring that up, that Jen had said that. And Bruce has said it himself.
Yeah.
And he's one person. I guess he's got a couple of people part-time helping him, but not a lot. And I brought that up, but I guess the 180, he can pretty much do a pretty good number on it, let's put it that way. He can do a lot with it.
Yeah,
But if it goes, and it goes, then it
yeah,
goes.
I mean, that's up to, between him and the selectmen, how they figure it out.
Well, actually, no, she's saying, basically, it's up to us. If we have to, it's not even up to us. If the state comes through with the 1.2 million, then we're gonna have to start cutting from somewhere. So that's where she was, you know, she could give back the 2, the school could give back the 5. That's 7 before we go anywhere. And then we'll have to see what we do with the rest of it, if it comes through with the 1.2. So, I don't know what to say on it.
I just had some general thoughts about the process collectively. And since no one else is here to ask questions, it gives us a chance to possibly air this. I don't see the budget challenge we have this year as in any way a partisan issue. I mean, there's no reason why anybody should be divided on it. We might have different priorities and things, but it's a very difficult year, maybe the most difficult we've had in a long time. But on the other hand, it provides certain opportunities for us too, to make the right decisions, so it minimizes the injuries done to people who live in the town, and it maybe prepares us to deal with what's gonna be coming up in the future. So for my part, I'm up to 43 towns now. I've gone through different approaches to what they're doing, what percentage of the budgets are actually cut, how many have sent out supplemental tax bills, how many are going with other kinds of, you know, hybrid things where they're taking money and doing this. And there's a lot of opportunity out there, or at least a lot of choices that we have out there. I think we should approach the thing as objectively as possible with the main goal of, which we all are committed to in general, main goal of trying to do the best we can for people, all people, given the conditions that we're under. But I think Steve made maybe the most important point for me at the last meeting when he said, you know, if we don't do anything to cut the budgets that are being requested for next year, we're facing a 2 mil tax increase. I was mainly concentrating on the deficit and how we were gonna handle that, but that's right. And so, I mean, these are the things we have to look at. You can look at what other towns have done, what percentage of, for example, school budgets they've cut based on the total value of their school budget. And it's quite interesting where we fall and everything. But I think we should hear what the people have to say, obviously at the public hearing, and seriously take that input. But the other thing we have to do is we have to communicate to them. And I just can't see where it wouldn't make sense to do this. We have to communicate to them the fact that things have changed. This is not what it used to be. We're not getting anywhere near the state aid we got before. We can assume that, I'm reading all these articles about small towns, leaders of small towns saying they can't bear the brunt of taking on additional education costs and infrastructure repairs, especially as the infrastructure really falls apart and the projects become extremely difficult, expensive. And also, they can't take on, for example, special education costs, because 4 kids could move to town, and that could be over $250,000 added to the school budget, just for transportation and things. So the bottom line is, we've got to explain to people that we're gonna have to make adjustments, and they're gonna have to make adjustments. And that, you know, we all want a community to be thriving here and to work. I feel personally, especially sensitive to 2 groups of people. Kids, because education changed my life. Without it, I would have never done a tenth of what I had an opportunity to do. To me, it was the most important thing that I ever encountered. But at the same time, I know a lot of older people now who are my own age. I'm not in this particular economic boat, but people who really have trouble making the taxes and getting along. I can understand that. I have a lot of sympathy for those people, because they worked hard all their lives. A lot of them fought in the wars for us, and a lot of them did very constructive things for the town, volunteering for all kinds of activities. So what I would say is, we of course have to listen, and we want to, and the people that ultimately in a democracy make the decisions, but we have to impress upon people that you just can't go in and say the same things we always did. And I'm hoping that the selectmen will come up and tell about, you know, what they lost in the cuts from the state. And I'm hoping that the Board of Ed will begin to say what, you know, giving back $500,000 means and so forth. And if we can get down to that and then take an objective approach, it seems to me, I think I've identified at least 19 different approaches here that towns have taken. We should be able to come up with something that would work for Stafford, okay? And again, I don't see any need for board conflict. I don't see, you know, obviously we disagree on things, we take a vote, that's how it's done. But I don't see any reason for partisanship or anything like that. To me, it's just a question of, all right, here's a problem, trying to solve it, okay? That's what I wanted to say.
I mean, that's, bottom line, that's pretty much the way it is. The only thing I have not an issue with or whatever, the Board of Finance, in my opinion, has a role to play in this. And their role is to look at the things coming in, and then make a recommendation about if they need to cut or add or whatever, and then that'll get presented to the town as, here's the budget, okay? What I don't think the Board of Finance's role is to educate them what's gonna happen if the budget goes up or goes down. And that's pretty much the Board of Ed and the Board of Selectmen, that's the way it's always been, is they're the ones that have to communicate that. I don't think we can, because think of it this way. We can go to the Board of Selectmen and say, you cut $500,000, okay? We can't communicate to the town how that's gonna affect them, because we have no say on where this cuts come from.
No, but you can certainly compare what we have now and what we're having, for example,
Yeah.
in the wake of the
We
cuts of
can't.
what we had before. I think that's important. I'm not gonna tell them, you know, this is what
Yeah.
you have to do, but, or this is what will come out of it, because we don't know, you're right. They can make their own cuts. We
They
give
have
them the
to.
amount, they
Yeah.
make their own cuts.
Are you
But-
talking about the Board of Ed making
Both.
their cuts?
Both.
But I think if we go back into what we used to do before, sometimes people on the Board of Finance never said a word. I used to go to the
Oh, yeah.
meeting, there'd be 7 people sitting there, 8, 9 people, not one person would say anything. And then you would have the same people getting up, let's have 0 tax cuts, I want the dump open on Saturday or Sunday, I want, you know, and it would be the same thing over, and people would go home believing that it's the same old thing. I always found it was better to prepare people for, you know, what you, at least let them understand all the complexities and what we're facing. And then I don't care, I mean, then you're right, then it is up to the people.
If you look back over the last 7, 8, even 10 years, you'll see that the budget almost always gets a cut or whatever, somewhere along the lines, and the cut doesn't equal the percentages of where the budget is. Now, I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but if you take a look at where, say, the Board of Education budget was 10 years ago, and the Selectmen budget was 10 years ago, the Board of Education budget, by a great percentage, has gone up a lot, where the Board of Selectmen hasn't. And that's what's put us in the bind we're in, because every year, it takes money away from the town to take care of needs we should be taking care of. We're not we're not maintaining things, and that's where the money first comes out of, right? Maintenance of everything.
Yeah, you're right. I just want to answer one thing about that.
Well-
Raise one other question, okay? You're right, except that I see a different trend in town. If you analyze this from a policy-making perspective, we're losing continuity at a shocking rate. I mean, the longevity of people who are in the first selectman's office is getting shorter and shorter and shorter. The chief financial officer is ill, no fault of hers, but she is. Another disruption. I mean, there's nobody really that has any institutional memory for a lot of this stuff. And I'll tell you, honestly, the only reason I think that the division of spoils has been somewhat fair is the fact that at least the Board of Education has goals, specific objectives they're trying to solve. They don't just come in and throw numbers on the table. I'm not talking about Mary because she's brand new. But what I am saying is for the Board of Education, they have objectives. And I think I couldn't see any objectives in the last government proposals on these specific objectives, except to shrink the budget. And I don't see any this time. And I wonder if there is any, and I think the difference is that there's more people with continuity in the Board of Ed than there is in the town. That's the bottom line. When Benny and John were
And
here,
the one
it
thing
wasn't
that you're
like that.
forgetting, both of you are forgetting, that we have a lot of teachers, and the teacher's salary, by state law, has to go up every year. We also are looking at a ton of mandates that come down from the state that are unfunded. They have to put them into place. So yes, the budget does go up every year, unfortunately, whereas we don't have quite as many mandates in the town budget as the school does in their budget.
I know, I'm just giving hey, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but we've starved the town for too long.
Oh,
and
I
that's why-
agree.
That's why we're having the problems that we have.
Well, I agree. I think part of our, how do I want to put this? We have been our worst enemy in the past also, not understanding completely this minimum funding requirement that the state has on the education department. We've funded things in their general budget that really shouldn't have been there. Because when you give them $500,000 to fund a capital expenditure, that now becomes their minimum funding requirement for the out years. They don't have that $500,000 expenditure because they just paid it, but yet, because it was in their budget, you have to fund it to the next year. We hurt ourselves in the past with that. That was my only bone of contention when we bring it up. You gotta be smarter on how to go
I
about
think
it.
the first year I was on the
Yeah.
board was a great example of that. I mean, how many mandates come through that they get state grants for or whatever, and they do these things in the school system? And they're great things.
Yeah.
But the problem is, they give you extra money for it one year, next year,
Yeah.
we're paying for it. The first year I was on the board, they got some like $500,000 to $700,000 money. That was to be used for, and what they did was, they hired an extra administrator and added positions. So that's terrific. I mean, it gave them more employees, but that automatically jumped the budget up $570,000 the next year to fund those, even though they weren't getting that extra money from the state or the federal
That's a
government.
good
where
point.
it
That
comes
has to
from.
be looked at, there's no question.
Yeah,
And that is exactly what happened.
yeah.
Exactly.
And actually, the year after that, I think, is when they tried to close the school.
But you know,
and
when
it became a big thing.
When the town has an objective, like fixing the lights and, say the thing I was most, because I was 25 years chairman of the rec commission. They want to resurface the track, they want to, renew the electric system up there, replace it, and so forth. When they come in with a specific objective like that, and they say, look, it's unsafe, we put all this money in the past, it's used by, everybody votes the money. I mean, because that is there's a specific goal, and they tell you what it is. And a lot of the other things, even when we talked to the department heads, I didn't get any sense of any specific goal. It was like a lot of drifting and continuity with what somebody had done in the past. I think that's their problem, really.
I think there's a problem with everything. When it comes to the budgets, you put out what you want, and then the stuff gets cut that, is the easiest stuff to cut, and in the end, you don't have a goal, because the stuff's not getting done.
Right. Well, the low-hanging fruit gets cut right off.
Well, hanging
right off the
fruit,
tree.
exactly.
You
Well,
know.
he did.
I love that phrase, Brian.
Dr. S is what they call him, and he has stated that he's gonna give us back, he's going to cut 500,000 from his budget. However, if more gets cut, if we have to cut more, then positions are gonna go.
Right. Well, you and I were working on 3 years ago, we had the long-term planning committee that was put into place. Well, that was fairly quickly dismantled, and nothing had been done for a couple of years on that. And it was like, that was the future planning of where we're going, so we can show the town, here's our future objectives, here's our future expenditures, here's what we need to program for and everything else. 3, 5, 7, 10 years out, not just town-wise, but education-wise, as far as the facilities and everything else, I'm still irritated at that, but.
Well, the whole continuity thing you're talking about, you've been on the board for what, 4 years? So for- How many business managers has the school board had?
Right, that's another thing, that's what I'm thinking.
We're on number like 5?
Oh,
No.
business managers,
Every
oh
year,
my heavens.
every year
yeah.
they add a new one.
Well, they've had more than 2
Oh, I haven't, at least
I think
5 or
it's at 5,
6.
yeah.
They haven't lasted more than a year.
No, it's
One of the
unbelievable.
But
things
that was the superintendent, she was.
But either way, that
It
kills
was
the continuity
difficult,
because the
right.
business manager is really, in a way, somebody we lean
The
on.
new business manager, thankfully, I think is given enough autonomy that she's able to do things and able to get things going. And henceforth, I think that's how we're getting the money back, is her putting things into place, the interim superintendent putting things into place, and from what I understand, this new fellow is gonna continue.
I actually think in a way, having new people there, including the interim superintendent, is really a good thing, because it really puts fresh eyes on a budget. When you go through the whole thing, which another superintendent who's gonna be there long-term might not be as willing to do that. And I think the fresh eyes on it, is probably gonna make a big difference.
This Dr. S has been a superintendent in many, many schools and has done many, many budgets, so he really was on top of his game when he started. And from what I understand, this new fellow seems to be very, very nice and very willing to go along with what he's done so far, so.
Dave's been around, he said he's.
I'm sorry?
Dave said he's visited
No,
40-some
no, not
towns.
visiting, just reading.
Okay, reading about him,
Yeah.
so how many of them are predicting that schools, children per class is going to increase?
Are increasing?
Yeah,
I don't know, I only had time to look at
Ours
the
aren't.
statistics.
okay, so how do we reinvent it then? We keep spending more money every year on a school that has less and less students.
But this year they went up 47.
This year, they finally kinda
Yeah.
taken level.
They've
We've
leveled
gone
off
up,
finally?
yeah.
They've gone up, 47.
But you have to be careful again, and I do understand, if we have a significant amount less, okay, then that's something we have to look at. But a few students here and there is nothing, in fact, it makes the classroom a better place.
How many students do we have, any idea?
You know, 15 and change, she gave the number last meeting. I can tell you one thing they've done the last few years, and finally the last couple of years, there has been, because the question I always had was, we have this many employees and this many students. Students have gone down by 25%, but employees have actually gone up. And they explained it has a lot to do with different needs or whatever. But actually, I believe, Pat, 2 years ago or the year before, they did make pretty significant cuts in employees to try and help out there. So, you know, they could be at the bottom of where they can be right now. It's not like they've continued to grow. I think they've made some cuts. I don't know what the difference is.
They've made
now.
significant cuts in the employees.
What was it?
Excuse me, Conrado, I know that you're on the ground floor of what we're talking about. Have you noticed that there's a lot of cuts being made at the school?
No.
Like administrators and things of that nature?
No.
You haven't noticed that?
No.
I'm just looking at the last 2 years' budget, and I know that it went up. I'm assuming that the years before that, it went up.
Actually, 2 years ago went down. Did it actually go down? Was it last year or the year
Yeah.
before?
No, last year was down.
Flat?
1.5%.
So have you seen people being rehired for the positions that went down?
Only one position have been rehired.
I'm sorry?
Only one position that has been refilled.
So then it was significant cuts in personnel?
Last year, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And the year before. The thing is that when we talk about teachers, you have to, in order to remove or cut down a teaching position, you have to lose about 60 students at least, because each one of us has about 80 students. So you could cut 20.
You know, that's.
You're not gonna just let off one teacher.
That's a
20
good
or
question,
30,
because Dr. Smotis
Yeah.
mentioned that with everything they went through, they've reconfigured the high school and the middle school
Mhm.
or whatever, and he said there's gonna be significant savings there. Now, we really didn't question him on it, but where does it show up in the budget?
That's what's showing up.
It's been discussed today.
He's
Part of
talking
that has been discussed today.
You're gonna see a $500,000 less.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's
but
what's
what
showing
about
up.
next year? Because next year's budget's going up over this one, which isn't $500,000 less, it's, you know, a lot more. So how does that translate from this year to next year?
I'm sorry, I can't answer that, but I
Well, I
think
know,
it's a
that's
good
what-
question for them.
That's what we want to ask
Yeah.
them.
Let me ask you a question though. If we look at budgets, what gets returned every year? we're not spending our full budget. So that means.
Our budget meaning the.
Every year, how much money do the different budgets get returned? We do transfers and everything else, but believe it or not, that's found money.
Yeah,
If you've gone over the last 5 years, we'll say we don't spend $700,000 or $800,000.
that is, well, that's also how, I don't think it's, that, I think that's a pretty high number, but I know every year
I
it's
think
been
it's very
returned.
high, yeah.
Because that's, but keep in mind, that's the one thing which has been a saving grace.
Well, I'm saying
Because
it's a-
now our cash balance is higher,
Right.
so, because we're gonna have some significant things we have to do. So that might just go back into the cash balance.
So I wasn't here when you guys were, these budgets were developed, but why do you keep giving more money every year that they're gonna return to you? And then increase that number the following year by a percentage,
Let's
because
ask a former selectman.
because-
On education, we have to.
I can
Okay,
explain some of it.
Wait,
The school board, if you have, say we give them $3 million a year, okay? We can't go below that. It's by state statute. We cannot go below that.
regardless of
Regardless.
whatever.
Regardless, we cannot go
Well,
below.
But we
the
can
answer
buy-
is,
Again,
when you do
state
it,
mandated but not funded.
Okay,
the state will take money away from you.
they'll give you,
they'll give you
they'll
less.
give you
So it
even
doesn't
less
make
then.
any sense.
Yeah.
And I think on the educational side, I think Rich can answer the town side, but on the educational side too, there's a lot of things we're funding in there. And if you listen to what they have to say, they're doing so much for special ed and so forth. And that's really, how I understand it, that's a shot in the dark. Because you're assuming you're gonna have so many kids here, and you might end up with more or less, and that's
Okay.
probably where the
That could blow your
difference is.
budget up in a heartbeat.
Yeah, or you could save money because kids, you don't have as many kids that go out of district or whatever.
Right.
I mean, one,
That's what we're hoping, that more kids stay in this school instead of going out of district. That's very expensive.
right, I mean, I'll go back and I took a look at it, because my eyes just got big when I looked at it a couple of years ago. One student in the special needs program was costing us close to $200,000. That's just one student. And I was like, wow,
So,
you know.
and not to sound really heartless or mean
No.
or anything, but wouldn't it be cheaper to just give the parents $50,000 a year to homeschool?
Well, wouldn't
their
that be
children?
nice if we could?
Buy them another
The
house
state,
in summer.
the state
so, yeah.
mandate requirements that are there for
Unfortunately,
us,
yeah.
make us do X, Y, and Z. And, okay, I
If
get
they
it, I'm
funded
not trying to,
100%, I don't
Yeah, but
see
that's
a
the thing,
problem
they
with
don't.
that,
They
but
don't.
how can it be mandated then?
because they're saying, this is the laws, this is what we have to
Law.
do, and then they turn
Who
around,
challenges
and
the
they
law?
fund it the first time, and then they don't fund it every year.
I don't know. I'm
Well, I
just
can tell
wondering.
you that, the
Yeah,
Supreme
it's-
Court ruled in about a dozen cases that every person born in the United States as a citizen growing up here is entitled to an education, regardless of what that means. That's the idea of equality and the idea of an equal starting point. And it doesn't matter what they have to do or how little the success is. I mean, if you take somebody who's just not, you know.
So even though there's zero chance of success, it's okay
Well,
because it's
That's what,
following a
that's
letter
what
of
it
law.
means by,
Okay.
you know.
But the No
equal.
Child Left Behind changed that completely. Because now, even though you don't have the comprehension level to get there, you're holding back the classrooms to make sure that they're all graded to the
Well,
same
that's-
standard.
And
That's
it's a
the
very
problem with our
bad
education
system.
system.
But it's not
today
all,
is
I
because
mean,
of
I'm
that.
talking about someone who's, let's say,
But-
severely
Yeah,
handicapped,
just
they have to go to
yeah.
special
The
enforcement.
regular education.
It's the United States, I mean, that's
Yeah.
what it is, so there's.
The
nothing
bottom
to
line
do
is
about it.
the school department's hands are tied,
Yeah.
the taxpayers' hands are tied because we have to fund it.
Yeah.
Right.
I wouldn't be opposed to asking about numbers of students in classrooms, I mean, that could be good. If,
Mhm.
I wouldn't say, it's not 1950, we're not gonna go back to 32 people in a class.
Do you have
but
any idea
if
what
we're
the
way
average
above or
is?
below the state average, we
I
should
would
know
say
that,
about
you know?
17.
About 17?
17,
So we could double up your classrooms, right? We get- yeah.
He's ready.
There's not.
Just 'cause he's that good.
Now the classroom cannot, you don't have enough equipment.
Well, that's the other thing nowadays.
There's another thing, the computers, you buy computers and within 2 years, as you well know, they're antiquated. It's time to get new ones to keep them up to date, so it's a tough situation. But getting back to, it's gonna be
Modify
part of our
Xbox.
job as to whether we're gonna tell Mary Mitta that she's got to cut, 200,000, or are we gonna give her the 100,000 to give to Bruce?
Well, I think we gotta wait for her budget, because we don't do anything with this year's budget. You know what I
No,
mean, that's up to her. I mean, we gotta wait for the other ones, which we're talking about, I assume the 18-19 budget. We gotta wait until they finalize everything and present it
right.
before we really do
Nothing's been
anything.
finalized yet.
here's,
But
I
it's
mean,
something I want you to think about.
right, I feel for Mary at this point, just simply from the vantage point that she's new in here, I get that. Everybody, when you step into it, it's a little bit new, okay, so there's a lot of adjustment
Which
that
is
goes
why I
on.
think a town manager is a need.
Right, oh,
But anyway,
please,
Let's
okay,
not
I'll
go
agree
there.
with you there, but anyhow, but
She
then
actually-
Lisa's been out, and who do you go to for answers? Who do we go to?
Mary's
for
going to
answers?
Lisa. Lisa's still
It's
doing
like-
things, but she's doing it at home.
Yeah,
Well,
but
she's
it's-
a big proponent of a manager, I think.
Did you see the video that Mary put out over the weekend?
No.
She put out a video just about, this is what's going on in Stafford, this is what we have to do. It's actually very good. And one of the things she,
Where is it?
it came off of her page,
It's on
and
the,
it's been,
Oh,
it's
see, I'm
been
not
shared.
friends with her.
it's on the
It's
so-
been shared on a lot of the
it's on
town
the Stafford
pages.
You don't need to
YouTube.
be-
Is it Stafford.org?
No,
No.
no, Facebook.
It's on the
Just
town
look
of
at
Stafford
Facebook.
YouTube site.
Search her for
How does that
Facebook.
be used to say?
Okay, it was
Facebook,
mentioned to me
but-
today, you don't need to be her friend to see it.
Yeah,
Okay,
totally.
search her and it will come up.
Good,
And there's a
I
video
will.
that's
And like I
up.
said, one of the
It's-
things she talked about a lot of things I thought were really good, but one of the things she talked about was, is it time, or it is time maybe for Stafford to look at professional management, whether it be a manager or a town planner or whatever.
I agree wholeheartedly.
And I can tell you that 5 years ago, for over a year and a half, I was on a commission, what do you call it, committee?
Advisory
We,
committee.
advisory committee, we did a whole plan of this is what Stafford could do or should do. Talking about different forms of government, a charter and things like that. So we already have that pretty much ready to go.
Trying to get it together to get everybody to vote on is the tough part.
Well, exactly, we had it at the point where we actually brought it to the selectmen's meeting for them to, try and move it forward. And one of the selectmen at the time just had some questions, which in my opinion had nothing to do with what we were putting forward, and just kind of stopped it. An election happened, and then nothing happened. So we have that in place, and that's something, I'll call Mary and let her know that we have it. And, maybe it's something we could present to the Board of Selectmen now, at least to get it back in the forefront. Our information's 4 or 5
That's
years
what
old.
Dave, excuse me for interrupting, but that's exactly what Dave was talking
Yeah,
about. We need the continuity.
We've done that. Matter of fact, Dave came to a lot of our meetings and complained about how early they were.
That's right, I did. Nobody could get there, I could, but nobody else.
But
You know,
we
one-
need the continuity. We
Oh,
really
yeah,
do.
absolutely. One thing that, I don't know, I agree with what you're saying, to a large extent.
Yeah, and what we propose might not be the best thing right now, but it shows you the different things we could do. And I think one of the biggest things was having to do with the charter, because I think we have to do a charter before we can do any of the.
You
town
have to do
manager
a
stuff.
charter before we can get a town manager.
There's
Yeah.
2 surviving chairs of the 4 subcommittees for consolidation, okay? Nancy Rivetto and I. And believe me, it was so complicated, and there were so many pitfalls and so many stages that had to be done just right, and the correct timing, you had to get votes for how many people are interested before you have a vote about should we actually set up a committee, and there have to be separate dates and everything. We hired a law firm in Hartford, a big one, and they went through the whole process, and it was a year and a half, but it was done right. And I think Enfield's going through apparently another call for a different kind of, they have an 11-member town council, and the mayor is elected by the town council members, but they want to change the system. But it's a wicked
Yeah.
convoluted thing, so you really need professional legal help, or you're not gonna get it
Yeah.
done.
Jane will like this, I actually did reach out to Attorney Slater preemptively when we were looking at doing it.
I wouldn't know. I
No,
wouldn't know.
But I did reach out to him because I know he's been, through conversation, he's been on his charter committee a couple times in his town. That's his line of work. He understands the nuances of Stafford. So I had reached out to him with the intention of moving things forward. And it just, never, nothing moved forward.
Well, if the
But
town reaches out to him again, I'm sure this
I
firm.
think we-
I think it would be great
There's
for
a
it.
cost to getting a town manager, but really, I think.
You know,
it's pretty-
Steve, excuse me for interrupting, but this is the one thing I'm hearing over and over and over and over again. It's gonna cost so much to get a town manager. But what I think gets lost with that cost problem is the fact that actually, in the long run, it's gonna save us money.
Exactly, we can't
Because
afford
people
not
aren't
to.
doing silly things after 2 years of not learning.
But this goes right to Dave's thing about continuity, you know what I
Correct.
mean? New selectmen, if you have a new selectman, even for say 4 years, what's the learning curve? How long does it take a selectman to figure it out? How long does it take a
About the
selectman to
time he
figure it
gets
out?
reelected.
Because Couple years?
It takes you a year to figure it out, and then you just,
Seriously.
then you just get kind of settled in where you can start getting something
About,
done.
just about the
and you
time
don't
to
have
get
to
the
Campaign
stuff
again.
down.
You got the
By the
campaign.
time you get voted out. So-
Right, that's exactly what I was going with.
But I agree, you know, David started off talking about looking at the future,
Yeah.
Steve just reinforced the same thing. What's our responsibility in this?
Yeah.
Is it, should we be,
Yeah.
it can't stay the way it is. The state's not gonna improve, they're not gonna come back and give you more money next year.
Yeah.
This is gonna be a problem that we have to deal with.
That's right.
Yeah,
And for us to pretend that it's gonna get better, it's
Yeah.
crazy, so.
when you watch that video, it's pretty good. It takes like 25 minutes to watch the video, because they put like music and things in there, whatever, but either way, when you watch it, one of the things she said, which I thought was really important, is that, it's almost like, hey, people always say, but this is how we've always done it. But you wanna know what? That's not necessarily how it
The
needs to be
best
done
way.
now.
Mhm.
You know, we're 100 years later, say, then you started doing all these things we've always done. Maybe there's a different way to do it that's better for the town.
And to answer your question, Tony, there's not a whole lot we can do about it. I mean, they present the budgets to us. We know exactly what we've got to put on the referendum, so we either cut or we leave it alone. I mean, that's our role, okay? But I do agree with Dave, and I do think that we could get out in the community and that we can propose it and push it and say it's the best budget that we can get together for the time being and really promote it. I think we can do that.
I think too, you should do it as chair probably, but in the introduction to the meeting, we're gonna have the public
Yeah.
meeting. You should just say that, you know, we're asking everybody to think not just about what's gonna happen in, July 1st, but to think about the fact that we're being challenged with a whole new kind of economy in the future, and that, we have to decide as a town how we wanna go forward and so forth, and let people understand that there's a long-range view of this thing too. The funny thing was, when Benny was selectman, I think for 18 years in a row, he could tell you everything that had ever been bought, how long it had been bought, where it was. I mean, and John Julian too. I mean, they knew as much about running the highway department as the people who were in there themselves. And I would say that since John died, I mean, nobody has been interested in that kind of thing, and nobody's had that kind of background.
Yeah.
But those people were state representatives, so they knew what it was like at the state level. They were also selectmen, they've been on every commission in the world, and we're not gonna find any people like that
Yeah.
anymore. So it's gonna have to be guys like us, amateurs and amateur women and so forth, that are trying to make the difference, and I think the whole country is a country of political discontent, so they're voting people out right and left. I don't think you can assume anybody's gonna be there very long, because they're not. And that's it, that makes it all different.
A couple of things. I wanna go back and address Tony's question about the budget on the selectmen side. And really, for a lack of better terms, when you put together a budget, it is your best honest guess of what it's gonna take to run the town. Now, throughout the year, things come up. But when you're doing projects, you put stuff out for bid, prices drop. We don't intentionally, budget more, we budget worst case scenario, and I always turn back a couple $100,000, and probably on the average. But, sometimes you have a shortfall, sometimes you have a windfall, and you're doing good. And then as far as.
Like with this year with the extra snowstorms, that's gonna chew up a lot.
Has it been more or less
of
this
money.
year? It seems like it's been less. I don't know.
It seems like it's less, but I think cyclical what happens. I ran into the same problem with building maintenance that we have this year, where they're saying, we don't have enough time. I did the same thing a year or two, funded a bunch of projects that never could get completed. So, we adjusted the next year. But all towns, not just Stafford, but all towns will look at their snow removal budget. You have a couple light years, and all of a sudden, you start pulling back.
You need to get over the head.
And exactly, you get kind of hit over the head.
The price of heating oil.
But,
We were used to
as far as paying attention, when I was there, paying attention to the public works because of my, little bit of construction and development background and training in wetlands and the environmental and drainage, I paid attention to what was going on there, I hired Rick, but, I was in a plow truck every storm until the union finally said, oh, no, you're taking work away from our carpenter, he should be plowing. So, you know, I mean, I was there every single incident that was going on and really took everything
I
serious.
remember one incident when you had to plow my street.
Yeah, the pickup truck. Well, funny thing is, I had one woman after a storm had called and said that she complained that the street had not been plowed. And she said her neighbor had to plow it with his pickup, and I said, really? And I knew the street. I plowed that street 3 times myself, and I explained to her that the pickup she saw was me in a town truck. Because we had like 17 pieces of equipment on the road that storm.
I think in the long run, you, like you said, you're seeing money come back, and the amount of money we're talking about that might come back this year, especially from the Board of Ed, is larger because they're trying to get back money, because we're short. But I think in general years, we're maybe talking $400,000 coming back. Now, a $40 million budget, it's like 1%.
12%, right?
Yeah, it's
I mean,
1%.
that's
And I'd
realistic.
rather have that come
Nobody's
back
perfect.
than be looking
Than
for
not
it at the end
fund
of
it,
the year,
right.
because we came in too short.
Then that's the transfers I was talking about.
Mhm.
It's better to have it funded at the beginning and then get it back than have to do all these transfers constantly.
It's not like there's millions of dollars coming back every
This
year.
this
Oh,
money
yeah,
coming
that's-
back from the
that's-
Board of Ed is relatively new within the last few years.
I'm sorry?
The money coming back from the Board of Ed is
Yes, it
relatively
is,
new.
yes, it is.
Well-
And this Dr. S has been marvelous.
But I think part of what we had done, 2 or 3 years ago, what we put into place is any monies that was coming back was put into the capital improvement fund for
Right, and that's
the-
still going on.
For the board.
Which is gonna pay off on that $48,000 bus bill.
Yeah, I mean, no, so it's saying, hey, you know, you encourage them not to throw the money away.
Right,
Okay, but to be frugal about it, okay, spend it judiciously. If you have money left over, don't waste it, put it back out there because, you know, the new gymnasium floor, the new whatever that you need, you know,
You're
we
being
can fund
very
it in the
kind,
future.
but I used to work in the
was trying
school
to be.
system, and, you know, in the spring, I used to work in the athletic department, the AD would come to me and say, hey, Steve, we have like $600,000, do you have anything you need? In other words, and he would say, if we don't spend it, guess what, they're not gonna give it to us next year.
they're gonna cut it,
So
yeah.
if you have the extra money, the school, everybody in the school is looking, how can we spend it?
Yep.
And get stuff so we don't get cut.
The truth is,
But knowing that it's going into that fund is,
Exactly, I
as
think that's a
Brian
great
says.
idea.
but the truth is, we can't cut them next year.
No, we can't.
Because it's a minimum funding level. So if they save $1 million, they can put the $1 million back to us because they're not gonna get cut next year.
So the fact that they're putting it into this fund
Yeah,
is really helping a lot,
But-
because they're not spending it
Right.
foolishly. They're trying to save it to put it into this fund.
Right, it reduces our expenditures in the out
Tony,
years.
maybe you're not aware of it, but what we did is we created a fund for the school, and it's basically a capital projects fund. So whatever they give back to the town, not the 500 that we're talking about this year, but on a normal level, anything that comes back from the budget goes into that fund, so that they have that sitting there if they need, as Brian said, a new gym floor or the, whatever.
My
Is
term,
that a separate number somewhere?
yeah, it's up to a
Yes.
certain percent of the budget we can put back,
right.
because they said how much is in it when we talked about it?
You know, Steve, I don't, because we just took a little bit out for them for something.
$58,000, I think.
How much?
I know it was like 58,000.
So basically, it gave the school the incentive to,
Return
instead of
money.
spending all the money, to return money, as long as some of it or a portion of it went into this thing, so that they could spend it as needed for a certain project.
But they have to come to us for permission to do so, so that we know what's happening.
Well, that's what a lot of towns are doing
Good
now,
idea.
for the towns and the schools, just creating special like contingency funds that are
Correct.
built right into the budget, and the money's not returned, but it's put back in there, and they're all assuming that this is because the funding from the state is gonna be cut more and more and more. It may not be, but it's not gonna get any better, but it may not be as drastic as they.
It may.
I think that things are being delayed a little bit this year because of the snowstorm or whatever. I think it's a good thing, because really, we have no, you know, we have no idea.
No, we
Really
don't.
don't.
No one's gonna know until November.
Right.
Thanks for the
Because
motion.
whichever party wins is gonna be drastically different support for the towns. And if it's split, like it's likely to come out to be, then you're gonna have this, what you're getting now. 1 month they take it back, they give you something back the next month. But if there's a clean sweep either way, then you'll have a pretty good idea what you're gonna be getting. But both parties have dug in, they have clear positions. They're trying to win on really extremist, non-compromise positions. And you know, we can tell the people what we think, but we don't have any idea what's gonna happen, nobody does. And the political thing is gonna be very interesting, because I'm following it closely on the Democratic side, and people are coming out to run for Democratic position, state rep and state senator, that are unbelievable. I mean, you know, deans at Yale Law School and a professor of neuroscience at Yale Law School running for the State House. I mean, it's unbelievable. And the Republicans think they're in a very strong position. I think they are. But the people that are coming out to run locally are gonna really shake things up. So there's nobody who can predict any of that stuff.
No.
But the one thing that, you know, is supposed to be the key, I don't care who you are, every book you ever read, Republican or Democratic, they all say that the goal is to create some kind of quality in the community where people can live a decent life and be proud to be there. You don't wanna beggar any group, you don't wanna, you know, drive people out, you don't wanna handicap their kids for the future or anything like that. And that really should be our goal. If you look at just the roads in Stafford, I mean, really, the town, there's no way ever that they're gonna be able to repair a lot of the roads that are broken down.
Yeah.
We're lucky if the main thoroughfares can be kept open, because the cost would be astronomical. You'd have to bond, you know, $20 million to do those kinds of repairs.
Well, that's just Stafford. Don't you remember the presentation Rick gave 4 years ago?
Yeah.
On the
Oh, yeah,
roads?
that's right.
That was $20 million just
Yeah.
to bring, not to actually get everything done,
Just
just to
to-
bring it up to where it's not
Code
dangerous.
or whatever, yeah.
What happens if they find the bridges and public buildings are cracking too with the foundations?
I've already heard there's a problem with at least one bridge in town. I
I know there
haven't
isn't.
seen a state bridge guy all the time.
Somebody in Coventry told me that they have several bridges that are really questionable.
I'm hearing that there's some high schools that are also cracking foundations.
I mean, look at the bridge at the end of, down by Firehouse number 1, is that the one,
Yeah.
Stafford Hollow?
Yeah.
How
They
long has
still
that been
haven't-
closed?
I know, they still haven't.
6 years, 7 years?
Yeah.
Been a while. But you know, what you said about the fact of, you know, both parties want the same thing. It's just amazing that, how can you both want the same thing? And this isn't anything you can do about it. How come it's so different trying to get there? You
Well,
know?
locally, I don't think it's as partisan as it is at the state level.
Like
Here,
you
you gotta
said,
face people and you're
I
trying to
don't
solve
think it is
problems.
either. I mean, we've got a board of both Republicans and Democrats, Republicans and Democrats, and when we've got a problem, we generally work together on it.
exactly, I think it's important, you be nonpartisan. You know, one of the things that Mary brought up in her video too was about, one of the things you hit on was the long-term plan. We keep hearing it and hearing it and hearing it. So hopefully, there is some type of long-term plan put in place. You know, we have an idea where we're going.
Well, I'd be in favor of trying to do that. Because that's what we need.
Well, you know what she's gonna need? She's gonna need people who are gonna volunteer, or we'll do something like that. I mean, you'd be perfect for that. But those type of people are gonna get together and actually do it and get it done. You know, I've just seen so many commissions or committees or here, whatever, they start off and then they turn into nothing, it's not meeting.
You know, that's a really good point. It didn't used to be that way.
Yeah.
I was on committees that, you know, we only had like 2 fields in town at one time. And we got a route to do all that excavating up at where the big baseball field is, and people volunteered, construction companies and everything else. And they used to they had some good results. I mean, you're right, you don't see that.
Not being a part of a party, I'm gonna give you my opinion on it, you might be able to weigh in on it. I see these committees and commissions, and a lot of times, you see a lot of the appointees come in, and they're done politically, you know, by whoever's in charge or whatever. But there's so many people getting involved because it's a political thing for them. And they wanna go in, and they feel as though, hey, I need to go in to have my party use whatever
Yeah.
put in place. So you have a lot of people, I think, that get brought into it, that's purely a political thing, and then once they realize what's going on, they lose interest in it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because it's not easy to be on a
No,
committee
it's not.
or a commission. The revenue committee, how hard is that? That was like pulling teeth for him just to get people to be in it,
Well,
you know?
yeah, you're right, the meetings
And do something with
disappear.
it. Yeah,
But,
and I think if people get involved because of a political reason and realize they can't forward their political agenda or whatever, I'm just throwing that out there.
the other thing is, we did not find a pot of gold anywhere.
Yeah.
That was it, and there was no,
Yes, Rich.
One thing that and I heard it
Fran
when I
found
was-
one, he just didn't wanna share it.
One thing that I hear all the time, I heard it as first selectman too, where's the plan? The town has a plan, it's the plan of conservation and development.
Yeah, we have one.
Yeah, we do.
Donald Poland, I had him look at the plan, I had him look at the zoning regulations, and just to sum it up, it was your plan of conservation and development is a plan of conservation, and your zoning regulations work for you, and they'll continue to work for you, but if you don't change them, I guarantee higher taxes. The bottom line,
Coming true.
we don't have problems with spending in town. We're very frugal, and even, I would say, on the Board of Ed side, I think they really try. We have a revenue problem. Our grand list has not grown. Well,
Static.
I did a study, a few years ago where I pulled all the years, watching all these towns' grand lists growing. Our town isn't growing because our planning and zoning commission is holding the town back.
I don't believe that for a second. I don't believe that for a second, because
Planning
I've
and
seen
community
there,
development,
I've
that's my
seen the
feeling.
plan of conservation and development. I've been at the zoning meetings, zoning, planning and zoning, not because Nancy's the chairman, that's not where I'm coming from. What I'm saying is, the regulations are there, they stand on their head and wiggle their ears to try to get people to comply with it, but you get people that come in and refuse to comply with it and wanna do it their way. That just
And-
can't be.
And it doesn't have to be that way. This
And the
is
other
my
thing
wheelhouse,
is-
this is what I do.
And Rich, you know it as well as I do.
Yes.
The economic development
Yes.
is the committee, which, by the way, congratulations, you just became chairman of, is the committee that goes out and tries to find these companies that come in. Everybody blames the planning and zoning because we don't have two grocery
they
stores.
both- they both
That
have a
isn't their
part in that.
problem,
They
that
both
isn't
have a
their
part in
What I'm
job.
gonna explain, and I'll only say it one time, is I've heard it for years. Everybody's saying, I want our town to be like this town, this town, this town, and this town. All of these towns that they're throwing out there, you can't have only part of what they have. Every single town has a Walmart in it.
Has a what?
Has a Walmart in it. But we had an anti-Walmart campaign in this town that shut down retail development. These other towns like Sturbridge and Avon,
Yeah, but you know
everything
as
that
well as
everybody
I
said.
do,
They didn't really wanna come.
Stafford's never
They
going
were
to
using us as
support it.
bait.
And it's gonna leave, and it's gonna leave a hazmat mess, and it's gonna leave
Well,
us
But it created
cleaning it up.
a knee-jerk reaction, which
Right.
lowered the cap on that,
I know.
and it pretty much sent a message
I
out
was,
there.
I wasn't in
We're
favor
not-
of that, and this is really saying no. As a union person, I didn't want them, but I wasn't part of that. But I'll
I
tell you,
wasn't
the only
either.
thing that, what you're saying is theoretically it's right. And you know more about this than I do, ever, but the one thing that, you have to remember is, up until the last 2 or 3 years, that board was controlled by Jackie Mocco.
Right,
Teddy
no, Pellizzari,
well,
Roger Pellizzari.
the Rummel,
and Steve,
I can't
Tracy
think
It doesn't
Rummel.
matter who was in charge.
no, but no, I'm just saying though, but it was a completely different group of people,
Yeah, it
and they
was.
literally approved anything. They put through stuff that, it was, I mean, I went to a few meetings, and
If
now
you
you
did-
have people who are on the other end, so.
I don't
If you
disagree
get a
with you.
chance, look at the plan,
It's opened up a lot now.
look at the plan of conservation and development as well.
I hear you, Brian.
Because I came to the meetings when they did it, and what I can tell you is when I was leaving, Don Poland was out there. And he said to me one thing, which stuck with me, and it was
Who
about
was this?
Don Poland, the guy who wrote it. That was his name, Donald Poland?
The planner, he
The
didn't
planner.
write the PLCD.
Yeah, he
I
wrote
know
the,
he is.
yeah. So he wrote this, and one of the things he said to me, has stuck with me since then, he goes, because we talked about the whole Walmart thing and all this different stuff, and he talked about that cap. And one of the things he put in that plan was, the town needs to do away with the cap. Don't make it higher, do away with it. You have the regulations to regulate who's gonna come here, planning and zoning, so just get it out of there, so you don't have people that come, or don't even look at the town. And he said, because you don't know what you don't know. And I'm okay, what don't I know? He goes, there are so many companies out there that will not even consider a town if they have to get a special permit or something. So basically, it kind of shut it down where there's, people who would have looked at us, and I think we really missed a big chunk of companies that might have come in, they won't even look if they have to do this. So I think until we remove that, because right now, maybe this isn't the proper plan where we're gonna get a lot of business, but remove it now, so that we can. He said, your planning and zoning regulations done properly, you'll be able to regulate anything. If you don't want a Walmart, you'll be able to keep it out. It doesn't matter.
But isn't it so large though, that limitation they put
Basically,
down,
this is not
unless you
our-
had an airport, you know what I
No,
mean?
you take the limitation out, you don't put limitations in. Your planning and zoning can regulate.
One of the things when you look at that regulation, basically, we have a smaller big Y than the rest of them because of that regulation.
Oh, is that true?
We wouldn't let them build the.
Right.
You know what they want.
Big Y, we wouldn't let them expand that mall because it's 95,000 square feet. And our regulation is 40,000 square feet.
So
They
we
raised
capped
it.
it right
They
to
raised it
60.
recently, I think, to
But
60 or.
the one other company, because I spent hours on the phone with them, was Geisler's.
Right.
And Geisler's had an offer to buy the co-op. And they weren't, but they said they wouldn't even consider it because of the 40,000 square feet.
No, they wanted a whole lot more.
And
I
I
think
think this is
Geisler's
small
here,
scope.
that'd be
So
awesome.
that
Huh?
should be reviewed then.
That'd be awful if we had a Geisler's here now, huh?
I think it would be nice, yes, but I mean, that, basically, that regulation killed that. At least, they wouldn't consider it.
Yeah.
Period end. There's no, I
You
mean,
don't know what you don't know.
but they looked at, I mean, the Summers Plaza, the guys was over in Summers, just to stock it was $1 million. So you're looking at the investment, you have to come in there. I mean,
Sure.
it's nothing to-
Summer, if you look at summer square footage, how big are they over there? They're not that big.
The regulation includes the whole mall.
The whole
It's
plaza.
about
Actually-
65,000 square feet.
Okay.
So
They
the answer
actually,
is, you
somebody
couldn't
brought
build
that as
that
an
big.
example.
Okay.
Somebody brought that as an example when they talked about removing the cap. And they brought that in Malin as an example of, you couldn't do that in Stafford because of your cap. There was no way to get it done.
Well, it's not that, but
Well,
we couldn't expand the big
Excuse me,
language.
Fran, but Brian had a question.
Well, no, one of the, this is just one of the things that I've heard. Someone was talking to me the other day and they were saying that, I guess, Big Y was looking at bringing in a new gas station into the town. They were looking at expanding the gas station, putting in more pumps that were there,
New
putting in
building.
a larger facility and everything else, and it got shot down because it was gonna have a red roof.
No, that wasn't the
That's,
only
that's
reason.
what I was told, it was being
They
shot down.
I was at the
And I'm like,
meeting. They
okay.
refused to do anything that the planning and zoning asked them to do because they were the big Y and they could do what they damn well
But what
pleased.
were they asked to do that was out of the?
So what
out
you're
of the realm?
saying is my ego is going to trump your
Yeah, because
development.
what I read about it was about the roof, the windows, and something
Correct.
else. And, you know, and I looked at it from the simple standpoint of, wait a minute, so they're not even gonna even try and do it, which, how much was that building gonna be worth to add to our tax base? And now they're just saying, we're just gonna leave what's there, you know, what the heck with it.
They didn't wanna do the sidewalk, which according to, now I'm not sure about this, but according to the plan of conservation and development, there's gonna be a sidewalk from the big Y all the way down to downtown, as new buildings go in and new places go.
That's,
They
that's
refuse to do
the
the sidewalk.
concept, the theory. You know, I even had conversations with the state, because people would call Tony's office, and he'd turn it over to DOT as far as the sidewalk, and even they would be looking at the terrain coming down by like Dunkin' Donuts in that area and say, I don't see a sidewalk going in here anytime in the future. But the theory is if you start planning for it, even if you don't put the sidewalks in, you start making the setbacks proper, keeping the easements and
The
everything
space for it.
proper, keep the space for it.
Number one, this board is not the planning and zoning,
Right.
so I don't know that much about it, and I don't think anybody here does. However, well, with the exception of maybe one or two, but the problem here is that we still have a budget that we've gotta get together, and we still have a public hearing. The first public hearing is when, March
24th, is it?
28th, am I correct?
It's a Wednesday, right? 24th,
It's a
28th.
Wednesday.
28.
28th it is?
Yes.
So at this point, do we have anything that we even have to do before that?
Well, I know that the Board of Education is coming in with their budget, and they wanted to go over it I wanted to go over it before the public hearing. We have one date that kind of got blown up, okay. Do we have another one, Aaron, with the Board of Ed?
No, because next week they're on vacation, right?
Correct.
No,
No, they're not.
You're thinking April.
April.
They have vacation in April. Your next regular, this board's
Yeah,
next
we
regular
snowstorms
scheduled
we
meeting
get.
is the 21st.
We're having a meeting our next meeting is the 21st, and I'm going to invite the board to come here to go over their budget on the 21st,
What's that, next Monday?
before the public
Wednesday.
hearing,
Next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday?
so that we can have an idea of what's going on there.
Richard, you gonna be
I don't
there?
know if that's-
Because I got a meeting that night.
So it's next so that's next
can't
Let
miss
me
Wednesday.
just
anything,
double
right?
check this.
Wednesday, I should be
That's
able
next
to.
Wednesday,
I should be able
correct?
to.
I'm just double checking.
What do you mean should? We went Wednesdays.
No, that's what I'm saying, I should be able, I can't tell what's gonna happen tomorrow for crying out loud, but, no, Mondays are typically bad, I mean, Wednesdays,
Even
Wednesday,
better.
I should. You know.
When you look at
Unless it's
nationally
Tuesday,
how
I can't
much
tell you I'll be there.
you have to offer companies to come now, I mean, it's unbelievable. They're, even local communities down south where they've been doing it for years, they're complaining that it takes them 20 years to get any tax money from a new company coming in. The subsidies and all the special, exemptions for local taxation, all these other fees and everything, they're getting away with murder.
I'll tell you, Norwich has enterprise zones,
Yeah.
and, they're giving people incentives to fix their buildings
Yeah.
up, code compliant repairs, and people incentive to buy buildings, bring their business in. Basically, though, if somebody buys a building for $100,000, they put $200,000 into it, their taxes for the first 3 years are still based on that $100,000 value, and then it's phased in over 7 years.
But that's not a bad thing, though.
No,
No, it's
That's
not.
not a bad thing.
Well, no, except that for us, we don't have any money to start with, so it's not,
Well,
But
the
the
subsidy-
long-term planning is a good thing.
they bother it.
But I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah.
if we're bringing them in, and let's say, regardless if it's a Target, it's a Walmart, or it's anything, bringing in 100 jobs, and to give them incentive based on resident employment. Any kind of tax incentive should be based a lot on resident employment. Don't go bringing everybody in from the outside. We're concerned about our hometown.
Well, Warren
Yeah.
has done a lot for that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Look at 3M here. This is the most profitable plant they have in the United States. There was an article in the Wall Street Journal that, based on the total operational cost of that unit, they make a higher percentage of profit than they do anywhere else.
So when are you gonna jack up the sewer fees?
Yeah.
Well,
So-
they never refuse to pay, never. If they have a excess of solids going into that system and you say we've gotta have $39,000 more for the month up, the check's right there. They never gave us a problem. And they work with us too to reduce them. I mean, they even were willing to spend some of the money that we needed to, we were gonna update the plan to make it easier for them.
That's great.
They've been good. I mean, hopefully they'll stay here, I hope,
No, they're not gonna shut down the most profitable
but
plant.
you wouldn't think so.
That's another idea to, somebody, I don't know, what is somebody, because we don't have the committee, the commission, well, that commission of planning and, economic development, to talk to the folks from zoning, the zoning commission, because we have so many regulations, we can't have business over here because this and that. Are we gonna be fighting for the red roof as opposed to a blue roof?
Well,
But that's another thing that needs to take the partisanship out of it.
Yeah,
Because a couple of years ago, when they were trying to pass the change in the everything, it was extremely partisan. I mean, the planning and zoning and the economic development really were trying to do stuff together, but each was fighting each other. And it really didn't, it hurts the town.
to expand the base of,
A lot of
tax
open
base.
facilities in the
Oh,
town.
yeah.
Sorry?
We have a lot of open facilities in the town that could be utilized, that could be turned into something. The old
Well, I
Baptist
do know
Motors.
that the old bus company, Albatron's going in there.
Yeah, they go, good.
And
They
they're
are
actually
going
gonna have a
in.
small lumberyard with it,
And-
which will be nice.
Yeah.
You won't have to ride all the way to
And-
Manchester. to
Arbitron-
get it.
Cumberland is
out
going into
is-
Bacchus.
Is
Oh, they are
Big White
gonna go in?
closing now because nothing's in,
sorry?
is Big
That's
White
what I
closing
hear.
now because
That's a
nothing's
big
in their,
gamble for them.
in their
I'm glad they're
shopping
doing
center?
it.
Albatron's
They did
doing
start
it,
it
that's
right
their
away
anchor.
too, as soon as they got it, there's ripping up trees over there.
I don't know if they're close to it.
No,
I'm not saying
I
that.
talked to the engineers and they were still moving forward.
I
They're
got,
doing
every
way
day,
down
every day I
the
drive
That's
by there,
good.
they've cut the trees down, they've cleared it out, so.
There's big grants for that now. Even as tough as things are, federal money was sent to the state is gonna allocate it out. But for anything that was declared a brown field or anything like that, or a possible problem, there's all kinds of money that they can get.
So we've come up with a lot of ideas that we should pass on to other, boards to increase the money in town.
Well, when Tony set up that board, it only met 3 or 4 times. I was convinced that Mark Richards knew enough about buying vehicles and what to do, that he could have saved the town $1 million. And by the time he got done talking about how he used to buy things from General Motors that were left over for the year and what they did, nobody had ever heard of anything like it. It was valuable. And then, he just got overwhelmed, I guess, because we never were called back in after 3 or 4 meetings, but it could have been a saver.
Yeah, my
no
grandson
question.
was on that board.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, no question.
Like I said, that's the problem with a lot of the stuff we put together to start, it just falls apart. You gotta,
hold them to the fire.
you gotta get people who are committed to it and willing to keep doing it.
Well, he had all that experience at Bradley Field, so he knew about buying equipment, he
Yeah,
really.
But he
knew
also
what
had
was
a,
doing.
he also had a bank account that would choke a horse behind
Oh,
it.
yeah, well, I'm sure, but, they.
I know, I did purchasing for the state too.
You'd never find anybody else in town with that kind of expertise, I don't
Yeah.
think,
No.
running a thing like that.
Well, do we beat the
We never
budget?
had to worry about it, because
I
when
think
you
we-
were
I
a
think, yeah.
purchasing agent for the state.
Where was this on the
You've
agenda?
got, you've got the clout.
Budget discussion.
Yeah.
Now, when are we gonna meet again?
Aaron's like,
We're
I thought it was
meeting again
gonna
on
be a
the
quick meeting.
21st, which is next Wednesday.
Did we just transition to both new and old business?
I haven't suspended anything
No, I'm
yet.
just saying, I mean, I thought this was still a budget discussion.
Yeah, it is.
This was
It
added
is,
new
but I
business
just had a
combined.
question
We got
asked of me, when do we meet
Oh.
again?
It's the 21st.
21st.
The 21st, which is next Wednesday.
Right.
Yeah. Okay, now we are, does
Oh.
anybody have anything else to discuss on the budget? As I say, we will be meeting with the Board of Education on the 21st, I'm going to invite them here. Okay, do we have any, I know this is kind of ridiculous, but we gotta do it, is there any new business? Is there any old business? Dave, don't you dare. I don't care, if you've got new business, you
I
go
gotta
right
pick my
now.
grandsons up and bring them over to the house.
And any old business?
Can we review? No.
Anybody have any comments for anything?
I move we adjourn.
I would
I'll second that.
comment real quick.
And I'm not gonna
Before you
complain.
vote, it was nice to kind of have a round table and everybody throw some ideas
Yeah, it
out.
was.
You know, Dave's nailed it right on the head when he said it's about quality of life. Regardless of parties,
Right.
regardless of ideologies, we can disagree and, you know, banter on that,
This is
but it's
what I'm
about the
talking
people.
about,
That's what
Rich.
it
I
is.
mean,
You have
we're
to give
adjourned
up
now.
something all the time.
I'm seriously mean it, and I've
Wait,
been
we're not
telling
adjourned yet.
everybody that wants to listen,
All in
it's
favor?
not partisan.
Aye.
This board really isn't partisan.
I haven't
Call for a
seen it
vote.
yet, so I'm-
Call for a vote, we're not adjourned yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't, I? Okay,
Yeah.
the motion for adjournment has been made and seconded, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So moved.
So your sister should be calling you about the discussion on the planning and zoning.
I'm sorry? Yeah, I know, I mean, none of us are, except for Rich, none of us have ever been.
And then watch.
So we're gonna have any part of it.